I'm Joey Rayo Russell. I'm the president and CEO of Sonatrol Kimberlite. We run a verification-only central station and dealership out of Fresno, California.
Great. And this is Frank who we're referencing. So Frank and I had a contingency just in case he wasn't able to come. So I have a few videos that we've actually worked with. So I'll keep this up for maybe another 5 seconds or so. And then we will go ahead and get started with this shortly. Okay. So here is Frank.
Hello, everyone. My name is Frank Fernandez. I'm a retired chief of police from the South Florida area. I began my career at the City of Miami Police Department. I retired as a chief of operations and deputy chief of the police department. During my 25 years there, I operated as a SWAT team operator, a supervisor or team leader, and also a commanding officer. Held many other positions throughout those years there, gained an enormous amount of experience. Post-retirement, I went on to become the chief of police of the city of Hollywood, just north of Miami. Served 4 years there as the chief of police and the assistant city manager. And then I was recruited to go to the city of Coral Gables, just south of the city of Miami, where I became the director of public safety for police and fire, and also the assistant city manager. Concurrently, throughout all of my years, senior years at the police departments, I've been working with the Department of Justice doing pattern and practice investigations. And most recently, we did the critical incident review of the Uvalde mass shooting incident at Robb Elementary, again in Uvalde, Texas. I'm the vice president of PPVAR, a proud member of it, and I'm proud to be here today to talk to you about the alarm industry and the great service it provides for our nationwide safety.
Great. Thank you, Frank. Appreciate you introducing yourself virtually. And Tom, please.
Hello, everyone. To see such a huge turnout here, it's really exciting. I'm Tom Nakatani. I'm the Vice President of Customer Monitoring Technology at ADT, based out of Denver. I've been with the company about 30 years, and the primary focus of my group is supporting our life safety systems, our monitoring platforms, but we also do a lot of work with public safety outreach and some bulk account integration. So very happy to be here talking about ABS-01.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom. And Bob, if you can share a little bit about yourself, please.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bob Finney. I'm the Director of Communications Technology for the Collier County Sheriff's Office. Collier County is in Southwest Florida, the Naples, Marco Island, Everglades City area of Florida. I've been in 911 in many different roles, actually, for about 30 years. Just next year will be 30 years, starting in Pacific Northwest and moving down to Florida. So seeing different size agencies, different roles within the agency. I'm also, I sit as the ECC representative, Emergency Communication Center representative on PPVAR. And that's what brings me into the alarm industry, which I've learned a lot over the last couple of years, and I've learned, especially through the development of this standard and the technology, seeing in the alarm industry that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit right now. It's a good time for some change, and really encouraged to see what's going on with this new standard and the new technologies in the alarm industry.
Wonderful, Bob. Thank you. Appreciate that. And I'll just quickly introduce myself. So it's great to see many of my friends here in the audience. For those of you that don't know me, I'm David Morgan, co-founder of SD Marketing. We're a group that provides marketing services for the entire industry. But enough about me. It's all about our distinguished panelists. A couple things to take into consideration in terms of today. We were arm wrestling as to whether we're going to do the 100-slide version or just have more of an open dialogue. And everyone won because I wanted to just keep clicking on slides. But anyhow, with that said, we're going to walk through just a couple of slides to really help set the stage. And then as we go through that, we're going to have more of an open dialogue Q&A, and we'll have it in various sections. So with that said, before we get started with that, we have a story that, as we were prepping for this over these last few weeks, Frank shared a story with us that is really impactful and talks about personally, because, as Frank had mentioned, he's a former chief of police in Miami, Miami-Dade. And there's a number of stories, and as we get to some of the things that he's sharing, it's going to be interesting in terms of, your thoughts about the things that he's saying in terms of the stories that he's sharing. But let me just have him walk us really quickly through this story that I think is going to be really impactful for everyone here.
ABS-01 is an important tool for the public as well as for the police departments. Today, with advanced analytics and ABS-01, We can tell the dispatch centers, 911 centers, also known as PSAPs or ECCs, the type of information that's available based on technology. I'd like to share with you a story that still bothers me today, not because it was wrong, because today we can make a difference and make it better. But this happened to me at the Hollywood Police Department, where my first days as a police chief, an alarm call went off at a particular neighborhood. An officer responded just like they would on any alarm call with very limited information or no information. As the officer approached the home, he came across a door. As he was approaching the door, an offender abruptly came out of that door and startled the officer. The offender had a screwdriver in hand, threatening the officer. The officer discharged his firearm, fatally wounding the individual, the criminal that was burglarizing the home. So some may say, well, this is just a criminal. He was committing a burglary, he assaulted the officer. And back then, that's exactly how that criminal investigation took place. The officer was justified in that use of force. Today, with AVS-01, we are able to provide situational awareness, advanced information through AVS-01 to that officer while en route to that call. Had this been a situation back then when we had AVS-01, then the officer or the dispatch center would have received an alarm call with alert level 3, advising the officer that there was a threat to the property with a subject inside. The officer would have arrived. The dispatch center would have sent additional resources immediately based on the information provided by AVS-01. They would have surrounded the location, as many SWAT teams do today. They surround and call out. They would have called out this individual, and then we would have negotiated with him to come out of the property. That would have reduced that would have reduced the trauma that the officer sustained from having to discharge his firearm. It would have saved a life, and possibly even have that individual go through rehabilitation and become a viable citizen in our community. So AVS-01 is not only a tool to save lives for police officers, but it will save lives throughout. I believe in AVS-01. As a police officer responding to so many calls, so many alarm calls, I can tell you that I do want to have that information. If I know that there's an offender inside of that home, I'm not going to go up to that door. I'm going to hold off, set a perimeter up, and I'm going to call that person out. And through AVS-01 today, we are able to do that and save lives.
As we get into, so Bob, if you wouldn't mind sharing from your perspective a little bit about where things are from the ECC in terms of what the challenge has been, and just from your perspective, if you can share that, that would be great.
Sure. So there's approximately 6,000 ECCs across the country of all shapes and sizes. Most of them, a majority being smaller, 1-2 person setups. I'll start kind of talking about some of the benefits of the calls we get from monitoring companies. About 2 decades ago, I was training coordinator for a number of years. And pretty much at any ECC, when you bring in new hires and start to train them when they're taking their own calls, guess which calls are the easiest? And again, we set them up with. It's the calls coming in from the alarm monitoring centers. Why is that? Well, it may be obvious. There's a large volume of calls coming in, and they are scripted. I mean, to a certain degree, and ECCs do it a little differently, but they are a scripted type of call. You can tell the training what you're looking for, what you need to get, and they can visualize it in their mind and get that information. But the benefits kind of end there, I would say. And that's because there's not a lot of standardization across either ECCs or even law enforcement agencies in how they respond to calls. It's very different, kind of to Frank's example in the video. The response protocol changes, as you know. In some parts of the country, the response to alarms, there may not be much of a response to alarms. In our part of the country, we respond to everything as if there's someone on scene and something's going on. And that definitely affects the customer, which is our customer, right? The safety and security of them. If there is a customer on scene and there's an alarm called in and they may be there, we've got officers responding. In our case, we have 2 deputies respond at minimum to everything. and with a heightened sense of alertness. And what the standard allows us to do is to be able to look at the information that's gained and send a smarter response, I guess in my terms. But the opportunities that we miss now because we get such a large volume of alarm calls is really that data. Oftentimes the data that you may have in the monitoring center doesn't always get or isn't always heated the way it should be in the ECC because there's not really an understanding of what that information means on our end. But the standard helps to standardize it so that there is an understanding and that ultimately across the close to 6,000 ECCs, we at least are speaking the same language when we're speaking with the alarm monitoring companies and can develop our policies within our agencies to match that.
No, I'll tell you what, thanks, Bob. I appreciate you sharing that. And a couple things that stick out to me is, first of all, keep in mind, in our industry, in the private security industry, there are hundreds of monitoring centers throughout the country. And when you take into consideration the 600 and then multiply that by 6,000 ECCs, and there really has not been to this date a standardization in terms of how we communicate with each other. Also taking into consideration, whereas when many actual events occur where seconds matter, I mean, it's really, really important. I know we're going to be diving a little deep into that, but no, I appreciate you sharing that. So, Joey, if you can start off with sharing a little bit about how, when we take a look in terms of today, like how does the traditional, even though I know that all of us here, for the most part, we understand exactly how this works, if you can share like the 6-step process, and then Tom, if you can just share some of those interesting facts and data points around that as well, please.
Well, and this is just to understand where our pain points are trying to be better for law enforcement. We get a signal, regardless if it's verified, if it's a traditional alarm, what have you. Our operator then has to ingest it, has to decide, usually by a script. Then they're going to call the non-emergency line and many times stay on hold 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, get with the call taker. The call taker then takes our information. They then put it in their CAD system that then goes to a dispatcher that then ranks it on priority and will either broadcast or dispatcher or send out the correct people. That process in and of itself creates a lag for life safety, you think of it this way. All of us played the telephone game when we were kids, right? If you got to go through 4 people, are they all getting the exact information and is it all going to be imparted in the same fashion? So that's why this is such an opportunity for us to be able to do this in a standardized fashion so that everybody hears and everybody says the same things.
So when we're talking about the alarm process itself, it's all based on conversations, right? We all know that this technology has been around for a while. The processes that we use are all verbal. We call the ECC and we communicate to them in most cases verbally. There's been some advancements in that, but the traditional intrusion alarm, probably one of the oldest alarms that the industry has been monitoring, has resulted in some of those statistics that you see on the chart there. We've known, coming from IACP, right, that we like to say there's a 98% false alarm rate. Right? That's a little bit of a misnomer. I'll say that because anything that isn't a real alarm, right, a verified alarm, is by default classified as a false alarm. But that 98% number is from the IACP, and it's been out there for decades. What we maybe are starting to realize now also is that people don't talk on the phone so much anymore, right? Probably most of the people in this room, if you get a phone call, you check. If you don't see the number from your contact list, you probably just let it go to voicemail at this point. We're seeing that across the alarm industry. I would say on average, you see that number, 70% of all the calls that we make are not answered anymore by the customer. So when we try to make a verification call to get additional information, it doesn't go through. People don't pick up even when they see it's from their alarm company, right? Now, there are ways around that, by the way, so this is just call it the issue slide. Don't want to make it sound horrible. But all those false alarms, or all those alarms that the public safety side of the house responds to, there's a cost to those. When we talked with Frank, he gave us a number of about $130 per officer response. Right, we've used that number. He felt really solid around that. That $2 billion number actually came from a Freakonomics podcast, I think, that went out there. But that was several years ago. There's a real cost to requesting public safety to respond to these alarms, and it also puts public safety at risk. Every time an officer responds to an alarm, especially if they're going with lights and sirens, it puts them at risk. So all those kind of combine say that we know that there's a problem. We've been dealing and working with this problem. We've had plenty of efforts, right, to resolve this and reduce those number of alarms. Those efforts have been fruitful in some cases, but we can do more, right? And ABS-01, as we're going to start talking, is a big step forward in helping us advance how we communicate with public safety and make everybody safer.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you both sharing that. And, it's interesting as we're prepping for this, there's a lot of things that I learned about how this process works. And ultimately, remember, it's all about the standardizing of communication and really where seconds matter and improving, and maybe before we move on, I think one of the things that I think is really important, I'm not sure if Joey or Tom, you wanted to speak to this about in terms of the history of this, like, can you just quickly speak to the amount of individuals and the amount of hundreds of hours that went into actually creating the standard? I think that's actually really important as we're going through this. We've
Talked about the problems, and PPVAR with TMA, SEAC, some other industry people, we wanted to address it. And we had an idea, like I said, to come up with some uniform communication and ideas. When we put together this committee, it started in 2001. I've never seen a committee have this kind of participation. We had over 48 members of our committee that were there every 2 weeks. We had members from law enforcement. We had members from ECCs. We had members from comm centers, ECCs. We had members from products. We had members from data. And we had 3 separate committees. One was designed for the data and technology. One was designed from the central station side. And one was from the ECC side. We met every week for 2 years to get this standard through the process and to be approved by ANSI and TMA. This is the first time that we've had collaboration like this with public safety and our industry to provide it's a better product for our customers, but it's also a safer product for our communities and for our law enforcement. So it's very groundbreaking in that alone. What you're seeing up here is representative of what law enforcement asked for and what they need to do their jobs better and what we need to provide a better product to our customers.
Oh, great. Thank you. And as we get into ABS-01 in terms of our unified approach to alarm response, if Joey and Tom, if you can share a little bit more on this, that'd be great.
Sure. So we have there's a lot of benefits to ABS-01, and maybe we'll start by making sure everybody understands ABS stands for Alarm Validation Scoring Standard, right? That's what ABS stands for. And what it does is we'll talk a little bit more in detail about the actual standard, and it's fairly simple. But when we talk about the benefits that ABS-01 provides, one of the first ones is this clarity and efficiency, the bullet point you see up there. It very much simplifies how we communicate an alarm to the ECC. And the simplest way of doing that is that there's what we're trying to do is provide them with some key information in a very concise and a very standardized format. And it's almost like communicating a red, yellow, green status, right? We talk about the severity of an incident, and we take an alarm as an alarm as an alarm, where a burglar alarm is just that, and we started adding some levels to that. So this level is a very simple means for an agent from the alarm side to communicate with public safety the severity of a burglar alarm.
There is not a single one of us that live in a community, frankly, where law enforcement is fully staffed. I don't know of a single one in the country. And so right now they're trying to do more and more with less and less, and giving them enough information to be able to allocate their resources appropriately is very important to them. And on top of that, again, by having the collaboration we had to go to that, this was a partnership, and this is what they asked from us to help them. So it's one of those things where, as an industry, we're being good stewards, but we're able to help keep our community safer, because if they're able to prioritize resources, that means law enforcement can get to actual alarms and help our customers.
Great, thanks. And Tom, if you can speak a little bit to the changing landscape of the alarm response and why it is that ABS matters.
So one of the nice things about ABS-01 is it starts to address the growth and complexity that's happening out there. We have been improving our alarm monitoring technology for quite a while now, but we haven't been able to take care of or address how to communicate that information. So historically, we might get an alarm. We'll say it's a back window, and it's at this address at this time, right? And if we manage to get a hold of a customer or get a little bit more information, we try to communicate that, especially if there's a cancellation of the alarm. But with video, with audio technologies, with analytics coming into play, we have a wealth of information, but we have not been able to communicate what is actually happening out there any better than we have over the last, from 20 years ago, right? We still communicate using the same scripts to the ISC, and we have a better means of doing that now. So AVS-01 definitely looks to address the complexity of all these new technologies, analytics, all these things that are providing better security, and provides us with a very simple means of communicating that with public safety.
Well, and for that purpose, to hit on the bullet points, is going back to the technology. It's not even if you necessarily have newer or verified technology necessarily. There's things such as if you're getting a invalid code in, a human being's there. You can impart that information if you understand that, or your central station can. So not to mention we have things like alarm.com, Total Connect, all these devices that are giving us, these lifestyle devices that are giving us additional information that gives us the opportunity to give that information to law enforcement, which gives them an opportunity to catch bad guys, which they want, and it gives us an opportunity to mitigate false alarms, which they also want. So it's a great time to be in our industry because it's not even throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because I know in my conventional company, we'll add alarm.com and I get all these data points additionally to existing systems. So there's many things we can do to improve this, and now this gives us a way to articulate it.
Perfect, thanks. And so Joey, I'd like to, as we go to this next slide, Tom had mentioned a couple minutes ago about the green, yellow, red. Mm-hmm. Let's actually get to the actual levels and describing that of AVS-01.
AVS-01 is predicated on 5 levels. 0 is a no call for service, which is where we kind of want to race to as we're doing our enhanced call confirmation. Level 1 is that we've received an alarm with no additional information. So a traditional burglar alarm as we would normally dispatch. Level 2 goes back to my example of a keypad where we have an invalid code in, where we know we have a confirmed human present. But it could be, as we all know, our customers sometimes cause those false alarms, not us, correct? Level 3 is where we have a confirmed human presence as well as a threat to property, and level 4 is a threat to person. And the reason why this is all important is going back to Frank's story, is if we dispatch with a level 2, 3, or 4, they're able to respond with the knowledge that a human being is there so that they don't have an accidental discharge of a weapon, or they also are not accidentally walking into something blind that they could be harmed at.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna transition into more of our open dialogue Q&A with that of the panelists. And keep in mind that we have these in 4 different sections in terms of starting off with that of the implementation, in terms of some of the ground level changes. We're going to talk about the impact of that of the dealer or the pro channel, as well as that of the end user. We'll focus, then we'll transition to that of public safety and why it is that it matters. And then we'll wrap up with that of liability, safety. And we're going to talk about the future. Where is it we're going with that of AVS-01? So, and keep in mind, once again, for those of you that would like to learn more about AVS-01, because there's a lot of resources in terms of entire write-ups. There are various videos. There's a lot of information in terms of learning more. So if you want to visit this QR code, and we'll have this throughout the remainder of the slide. So Joey, I'd like to, as we kick things off in terms of that from the implementation standpoint, from your perspective, not only do you, of course, install professional alarm systems in businesses throughout the state of California and beyond, but in terms of as you implemented that of AVS-01, can you speak a little bit in terms of how how AVS-01 has changed that of how you process signals?
It hasn't changed a thing. We're processing signals the same way. It's given us a uniform way to communicate that information. To Tom's point, we knew a human was there, we just didn't always know how to communicate it to ISC. Now we do. So this is not doing anything different than we do now, other than having a standardized communication format.
That sounds great, thank you. And Tom, from your perspective at ADT, in terms of the implementation of AVS-01, how difficult was it? Or maybe you can speak to how you went from start to actually implementing it with some of the test ECCs that you're working with.
Sure. So the good news is that ABS-01 for a monitoring center is very easy to implement. Doesn't sound like it is sometimes because we talk a lot about the technologies, but ABS-01 was designed in such a way that you can do this whole process using the existing manual processes. So that was very intentional, right? That we didn't want to require certain types of technology or major changes in order to make ABS-01 happen. So the easiest way to put it is that if you don't know, it's a 1. Right, that's the standard alarm. We still process all these alarms coming in, and you can assign a score of one to those alarms if you don't know, really, you don't have any additional information, right, beyond what you typically have from a device. But the level 2 through 4 are really interesting because what the industry should hope for, and what we've actually seen, is that when we're establishing a confidence level with public safety that they can trust that information that comes through, that they will change their response, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that in more detail. But the actual implementation of this is just a little bit of agent training, because all the typical questions that you might do with your customers, or as a central station that you do during the monitoring process of reaching out to the customer, contacting through ECB or TCC, right? The enhanced call verification, whatever we're calling that now. When you reach out to the customers and ask them for additional information, when you have access to cameras or audio or other information, you just tie that in there, and this gives the agent just a different way of relaying the same information that they're already evaluating as part of their regular process. So we have a lot of agents, we have a lot of centers. We're getting ready to deploy this beyond our pilots fully in May, right? So that's every agent that we have, every alarm that we have that qualifies for this will be scored under the standard. So we can do it. I'm pretty sure everybody else can do it too. But the main thing is that you work with your central station, right? If you're a dealer, if you're an independent working with a third party, a lot of the third parties are already working on this. Just talk to them about how you can implement this. You don't need any special technology. It's really a lot of the existing process, adding some verbiage to this, and then working to implement it, right? Ideally, you can also work with your local public safety partners and help them understand. We're doing a big outreach program. The industry is doing a lot of outreach right now, but a lot of the training itself is fairly straightforward, and Bob can talk a little bit about the ECC side, but our experience has been they can implement this in a matter of weeks also.
Well, thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. Whereas you talked a little bit about your process, talked a little bit about training, things in that regard. Can you speak a little bit to that? Of any, was there any special technology that was required as you went through these initial or prepping and going through these specific pilots?
No, we have optional technology. I'll put it that way. We're trying to make it easier and automate some of this. So we had some fields created where you can log the information. We're trying to. It's interesting. Those of you that are familiar with the ASAP to PSAP protocol, there's already fields inside of that allow the transmission of the alarm level. We just have to make sure that both ends are capable of sending and receiving it appropriately. All that prep work has been done. So as a dealer, you can use all the existing technology that's out there. I would say as a sales opportunity, you can, it gets better. If you can add video and these other things in, right? Probably technologies and devices that you're already pushing with your customers. But definitely this is an opportunity to help reinforce the fact that this additional camera or whatever else that you might be looking to add into that system are meaningful, right? It's not just like it adds protection in another area. This can help change the response of public safety in a good way.
No, thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. And I think to me, one of the takeaways from what you just mentioned is the fact that it's not requiring special technology. Of course, there's learning processes changed as to how we go about doing things. But I mean, one thing that goes without saying is it's so important for us and vital for us as the private security industry to be unified in this regard. Because if we only have a handful of monitoring centers, and I know if time permits, we're going to speak a little bit later about, as we get to the future, and we have very many special guests. I can't count right now, but all of you are special guests in the room. But we have one of our good friends from UL that's in the audience, and if we have time, we'll speak a little bit to that in terms of some of the programs that have actually been recently put in place. But Joey, as we transition to that of the dealer and the end user impact, I do have just a quick question. A quick question for that of the group. So here in the audience, can we just have just a show of hands? Who in here installs security systems or fire systems in homes or businesses? Okay, a good number of us here. Okay, so Joey, question for you is, if I happen to, let's just say, not own a monitoring center, and if I am like a a traditional security company that is deploying these systems, what does AVSO1 mean for that of a dealer or an integrator, which is of course the lion's share of that of our of that of our industry?
Well, you are the face. Yes, you have a central station monitoring it, but from the customer's perspective, your central station is you. So that's number one, you got to get right with. Number two, what AVSO1 means for you, again, is better response, not only for law enforcement, but also for your customers. One of the things I encourage all dealers to do, I've encouraged it in my own business with my local branches, engage your local law enforcement, talk to them about this, start a dialogue. All of our companies, no matter what you're selling, no matter what you're doing, whether you're a manufacturer, whether you're a dealer, whether you're a central station, forgive me, I tend to be a little candid, but bottom line is we've all built our business on the idea of, frankly, police response. They are our partners. All of our value comes from our RMR, which is based on that. Start the dialogue, create the relationship, build the trust. If you become their trusted partner in your marketplace, that's only going to scale for your sales and for your business. So that's the best thing I can say is why AVS1 still is important to you, is because number one, from your customer's perspective, your central station is you. So you got to be able to talk to it because they're going to ask. And number two, a better relationship with law enforcement only builds a better business for you.
No, great. And just a quick follow, and I know, Joey, you briefly touched on this, but from that of not just from like the dealer's perspective, but we take into consideration that of the end user, what can you speak to in terms of what AVSO1 means from that of the end user perspective?
Well, it also helps us train our customers why it's important for them to, one, how they want to engage us and answer our phone. It gives us the opportunity to put things in place to make sure that we're updating their call list and updating their user information. It allows us to create a stickier, better relationship with our customer, at the same time making them better citizens and giving them a better opportunity to get the police response they need when they need it. So it's a wonderful way to unify our end user, our central station, our dealers, and law enforcement.
No, that sounds great. And Tom, from your perspective, and when we look at it from like an integrator standpoint, how, knowing that, I'd mentioned a few minutes ago how important it is for us to have a unified front, what would you say to that of, integrators here in the audience and that may be potentially watching this after the fact? Like, how can they help support AVSO1, even if they don't directly in-house have a monitoring center, if that makes sense?
Like I said, if you're using a monitoring center, right, as a dealer or third party, definitely talk with them. Most of the monitoring centers are aware of the changes that are happening with AVSO1. I would encourage you to encourage them to adopt AVSO1. And as David mentioned, there is a UL certification that will be coming out around AVSO1, right? So that's an important part of this, in that there is kind of a audit portion of this, right, in terms of practices and best practices and ensuring that a standard is being followed appropriately. UL is going to actually have a listing for AVSO1, and if your central station is interested, they should definitely be pushing that. But as Joe said with the customers, it should be an easy discussion to have, because this is a standard that will benefit them.
One thing I want to mention to several integrators is, depending on which third-party central station you're using, the majority of the large nationwide ones, they're already doing this. So engage them because they've already engaged your customers.
Absolutely. And there has been one of the groups that's been recently, Rapid Response has been recently referencing the fact that they've become certified in this, and they, of course, but it's just a matter of time where all the monitoring centers will be doing this and all these good things. So good. So I want to transition now to why this matters from that of the public safety perspective. And Bob, I'd like to start with you. So question is, at your ECC, how can you speak a little bit to that of the rollout and how things have been progressing since that of the rollout?
Sure, I'll speak to ours, and like I said, there's about 6,000, so I can speak to the feedback we've had and what we're doing specifically. There's obviously a number of small centers and corners of this country that have no idea what we're talking about. We, through PPVAR and through TNA, have done a large push over the last 2 years as a standard is being developed in associations like this, APCO and NINA, which is a 911 association, several of the state conferences. I mean, we've been reaching out, IACP, sheriff, things like that, and kind of putting the awareness out of ABS-01 even before it started implementation. And now that we've seen several stations that are starting to use it, then we're beginning to see how well people have in the ECCs have listened to the training. In our ECC, it's a mixed bag still, because it's not a consistent, it's not something, like I said, in that scripting that you're going to get every time. Some of our people who are more seasoned will actually may ask for a level if you have a level, and that's what we want to see when the pendulum starts to swing, to tilt across the country. You'll start seeing ECCs asking specifically for that. Do you have a alarm level? That's where we need to be. It is being discussed. There's several protocol providers that ECCs use across the country to provide instructions and questioning techniques, and so we're working with them to build that into their call set, to their questioning set. So that will be something that will become standardized along with ABS-01. And also kind of to the response, and that kind of goes with the public safety. So the ECCs, and I guess I should explain kind of the process on the reverse end. It may be common sense, but kind of what you're doing with the software in the monitoring centers, our CAD system, our computer dispatch system, have to be able to receive these new threat levels. That's pretty basic generally for a CAD system, that we have, depending on where you are, dozens or hundreds of different incident types or call types that we respond to in CAD incidents. In our case, we, along with commercial and burglar alarm, we have the standard, what we've always used, but now we've added levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. So when that is something that's verbalized on an alarm call, then the call taker can select that, and then the dispatcher can put that out, and I'll talk about the response side in a second. But I want to touch on ASAP to PSAP, because we're an ASAP to PSAP user. As Tom mentioned, back in the 2021 update to the ASAP standard, they knew that there would be something coming out, ABS-01, that there'd be another standard, so there were fields developed. However, those have not been implemented to a large extent yet on either end, on the alarm side or the interfaces that feed into CAD. And the reason for that is because there's just not a lot of that coming through yet from the alarm side on ASAP. What has been happening is I think it's called the update field. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going down the wrong path, but there's an update field in the TMA standard. And so what we get is we get an alarm, and then there's an update that will say what threat level 1, 2, 3, or 4 that it is. The issue with that, of course, is the benefits of ASAP in medium and large centers, where you have call takers taking calls, they put it in the CAD system, and then you have dispatchers just pulling up the call and dispatching it, and units in the field can often see what's impending and by call type. The benefit of ASAP, of course, is it never touches that call taker, that it goes straight to the dispatcher. So they don't often see that update because it's not changing the call type yet. Once ASAP gets to the point where this is synonymous with almost all alarm calls, and we can get our interfaces adapted to CAD, then that will come in automatically. We'll have that when it's entered in the system on your end, then we'll have that pop up or appear as a call type on our end. So there's still some of that human piece that's kind of broken down in the ASAP calls, and about a third of our calls are ASAP calls, and so they have to, the dispatcher has to read that and catch in the comments field basically, oh, this is a level 3, and then a level 2 more often than not, and then change that before dispatching. So that's a little bit slower, but that has been identified, and there is that work in the middle. Smaller centers, it's often the call taker is often the dispatcher, so they're often, as you know, talking and dispatching at the same time. And so they're more easily able to adapt and get that call coded correctly right from the get-go. From the response, now one thing I had expected, and again, I'm speaking in generalities, but one thing I had expected is with levels like level 1, that maybe law enforcement would perhaps send us lesser response. Like I said, we always traditionally, with the general alarm, we'd send out a minimum of 2 deputies to each alarm. What we've seen is, in a lot of this is, agencies haven't necessarily adjusted their policies yet because they want to get comfortable with this, see how trustworthy this is. You know, law enforcement's kind of hesitant to check this out, and so as we get the response or get the codes now, we're not sending a lesser response. But what we will do, so in alarm level 1, we still get the 2 deputies. Alarm level 2, probably still 2 deputies. Alarm level 3 or 4, that's where you'll start looking at getting a response with additional resources. And law enforcement agencies are, because the public's demanded it, a lot is because, we should know things. We should have additional data. In after action of a lot of incidents is, why didn't you know? Why did you respond that way if you had this information? Now granted, that doesn't mean law enforcement necessarily had the information at the time of response, but when we're looking now at AVS 01, we are hoping to have more information at the time of dispatch. So a level 3 or 4 may include drone. Several agencies are starting to have drone as first responders. So drones can be on scene. We've actually caught perpetrators because we've been able to track them from a drone running from house to house through construction sites that is difficult to do from a vehicle, and also send up other aviation assets. But also law enforcement likes to chase the bad guys. So if you have something where there's a level 3 or 4 and there's a higher potential of there being a bad guy, you're just going to get that larger response. And eventually this will be developed, as we see, there aren't a lot of 3 and 4s. We haven't had a 4, but as you start seeing these, you will, and that's a good thing. You'll start seeing the policies being changed in the response. And perhaps, I know there's agencies, like I said, that don't respond to alarms just because they don't have the resources and, but maybe now they'll look at that differently. And that's something, that it should be a marketing thing on your folks' end, right? Is now how we've done, like you said, I don't remember which one of you said, we've done alarms the same for decades. It's a different way to do this, and there's a lot of opportunity on the marketing end and on the law enforcement end to do this better.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Really appreciate you actually getting really deep and discussing a lot of the details because, of course, whether we have our own in-house monitoring center or if we're working with our third party, we get to see this side of the equation. But in terms of from your perspective and how things have moved as you've implemented and rolled this out with some of the monitoring centers that have been rolling this out with you. So appreciate you sharing that. So the next question is going to go to Frank. And the question for Frank is, can AVS 01 help to enhance the customer's services? And if so, how? Now let's quickly play that video.
AVS 01 can certainly enhance customer service. The more information that the police departments have through advanced analytics, through the AVS 01 process, the better off the citizens, the customers are when receiving services from their police department. This is a tool that not only can enhance that customer service by way of providing the right timely service at the right place for the right reasons, but also to ensure that the officer does not make a mistake and have a misidentification. So in terms of customer service, let's look at the critical points of where it can go really, really bad in a certain situation. I want to share with you another story whereby an officer did respond to an alarm call. This just happened to be a business whereby a new employee went into this business, forgot the code, which this happens quite often. The individual was inside just retrieving a file from the office. The officer arrived, the door in the front was unlocked. The officer walked in to check the premises with gun in hand. The employee, hearing noises, startled the officer, confronted the officer, and unfortunately, this particular new employee was shot by the officer and did not survive. So I say that because we can save unintended deaths. That officer did not intend on going to an alarm call to cause harm to anyone, let alone an individual that just forgot his code and was just trying to retrieve a file. So the essence of providing greater customer service comes by way of a police officer having the most advanced information available so that he or she can provide deliberately intended services for that appropriate situation.
So, Bob, I'd like to ask you the next question, which is, in terms of timing for that of the standard, why is it especially beneficial for that of public safety and that of ECCs?
Well, that's one of the term ECC is probably something that anybody's been in the business for a while has noticed. I mean, PSAP we historically been PSAP, right? Public Safety Answering Point, and now that the field is migrating to emergency communication centers. And why is that? It's because we don't just answer 911 calls anymore. And now there's additional data. There is more data coming in, and the expectation, and that's where the nomenclature ECC has come over the last few years, is that the expectation is that these emergency communication centers are going to have people not just taking calls, but a lot of this is going to come in non-human. But there's not a lot of standards out there for it yet. That's kind of what the problem is, but that's why the timing is also good. There's now have ABS-01, we have the ASAP standard. There's other things like automatic crash notification, although we're not able to receive those in a digital format yet, like we are with ASAP. So one of the reasons this is very beneficial is because public safety and 911 in particular has been working with Congress for the last few years to upgrade the 911 systems. You've probably heard next generation 911, that terminology thrown around, which is really an update to the technology, because 911's been out there for 50 years and in a lot of places is still the same analog technology. So there wasn't that ability to bring in this data. But working with Congress, there's an effort to fund over the next probably decade or so the upgrade of the entire national 911 infrastructure in the tune of some $15 billion. So there's really a lot of 15 billion real good reasons for an industry that has a standard to send that information and get a better response to public safety, to have that standard out there and be ready when that money does hit, because now we can use that almost as a use case in bringing in additional data and how we can respond effectively to it. So for that, I think it's excellent timing. I'm hoping we get that funding soon, but now we have a standard, like I said, to put in place over the next few months, and perhaps years until that grant becomes available. We can perfect it, so to speak, and work together to work out some of the kinks that we have. And I think it'll be an awesome use case, both for 911 and for the alarm industry.
No, great. No, appreciate that. Thank you. So I know we're running a little low on time. As we just quickly talk on that of like liability safety in the future, as I mentioned, we have someone here in the room that Javier Olarte from UL. There's a mic right behind you over your left shoulder. Can you just quickly introduce yourself and just share a little bit about the UL new certification for ABS-01 so that the audience is aware of that?
Sure. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Javier Olarte, and I'm with UL Solutions. And we were actually very proud to be a small part of the development of the standard as well. And we saw quite rapidly that this standard was a game changer in the industry. And as the standard was being developed, we saw that there was a need for third-party certification for this. I think everybody here in the panel has talked about the fact that this is a public safety standard. And UL is all about public safety, testing for public safety. So this aligns exactly with what we do. So based on that, we developed the actual certification program for that. And I think Tom mentioned that we're in development, but we actually have a program that it's already available for the monitoring centers. And we actually, I think it was mentioned here that we actually listed our first monitoring station, rapid response. I think it was mentioned here. So we're ready to proceed and help the industry with the certification process as well. So we're there, and we're a small part of this, and we're very proud to be a small part of this.
Thank you, Javier. Really, really appreciate it. And if, of course, anyone has any questions for anyone here in the panel or Javier, please catch us after the today's session. So as we're wrapping up, we have just a few more minutes. And before we get to final thoughts, if there's anyone that has any questions, we'll try and get to as many of them as we have, but we only have just a few minutes. So in the, I know we don't have a microphone, but hopefully you'll be able to project your voice so that everyone can hear and I can repeat the question. Now, as we're wrapping things up, if you wouldn't mind, Joey, share maybe some of your thoughts and in terms of future and where we're going from here. And if you have any final thoughts, that'd be great.
Well, I don't want to take too much time, but final thought is it's a great time to be in our industry. There is so much technology coming out. We're seeing a confluence of our technologies with Next Gen 911, some of our service providers, third-party monitoring. We have the opportunity to do this really well and do this really right. And I'm glad to Javier's point, to be able to be here to be a small part of it.
Absolutely. Tom.
What I'll close with is that all the stuff that we're talking about, it's not a theoretical, it's a reality. The standard's out there, we've implemented it. ADT actually has an example now, working with San Jose, where an elevated response was initiated by the police department due to a level 3, and we were able to recover a vehicle, right, because of that, because of the response was faster. So we're going to see more of that. Obviously, we haven't seen the 4 yet. That's a threat to life. Hopefully, we won't. But I expect that will happen at some point. But this alarm level response is real, and it has real impacts, right? And so think about that as you evaluate how you might be able to implement this for your customers, and it's essential as you work to implement ABS-01 with public safety.
Wonderful. Bob.
So I'll just say something I always say. We're all serving the same customers out there. You folks for revenue, and us on the law enforcement ECC side to keep our communities safe. And it is, like they both said, it's a great opportunity for both those reasons. So hopefully everyone takes advantage of that using the new standard and getting that implemented as soon as possible.
Yeah, 100%. So I know we literally have maybe 1 or 2 more minutes. So I don't know if we have any questions or any thoughts or feedback. Yes, please.
Are there a list of municipalities that are already using this as the standard under ECC for our monitoring stations?
No, but they're all have received training. There is some more formal training that's going to come out. They've all received information in the form of the stoplight and the cards, and so they should understand what it is when they're getting those calls, but not as far as who's live with, kind of like ASAP, where there's a list. No, there's not.
So would it be better to kind of lead with we have a 2 and then explain what that is in some cases? Or?
Actually, if you look at the standard, there's some suggested wording in there. I would go to the ABS-01 standard and just follow that.
Also, just to let you know, if you are engaging your local ECC and they're not using it, on the PPVAR website, there is a video to link out that was designed specifically for law enforcement to help them use that as an awareness and a training for their agents. It's less than 15 minutes. And so that's a resource for them. And also at PPVAR, for any law enforcement that needs additional training or information, please reach out to us. Our executive director, Jeannie, will work with them and get them whatever resources they need. Not to do a plug for PPVAR, it's just that's where we have a lot of resources for them.
Perfect. And we may have time for one more question if anyone else has a question. Otherwise, yes.
I have one. I'd love to understand how you are teaching people to differentiate between 2 and 3 level threats when you're teaching your central station agents, like when to say it's a 3 versus a 2.
Well, it depends on what information you have available. As I said, an invalid code-in could be, we do it through examples. That's how we teach most things in our centrals. And I do have, because I'm verification only, I have audio and I have video to really show the difference between the 2. But one of the easiest methods I've said is, if you figure, this is also not a linear thing. It can go either way. It can be a 3 and then you get a cancel. It can go back down to a 0, what have you. But the way we've explained it to our central station is that a level 2 is confirmed human. So we know someone's there, but they don't know they're a threat. So what else do we know that would indicate it's a threat? So in other words, were we not able to reach them? Was there anybody who answered at the local site? Do we have geofencing? Do we know if if they use apps or not? Have they recognized a text? There's various different ways we have that we can validate whether or not it's a 2 or a 3. But they need additional information.
Agreed. And 2s is just a confirmation of a person. So it could be, there's any number of technologies. It could be a keypad being hit. It could be someone on the phone that you're talking with that says, yes, someone's there, but you can't quite validate that, right, that there's a threat to property or a threat to life. So that's kind of the distinguishing levels between 2 and something higher than that.
Well, for instance, one of the examples we use in my central is that we had somebody on a phone confirm that somebody was there, and then we also got a glass break. So, like I said, we were able to use multiple inputs of information and data to say a glass break in a human, there's a high probability of a crime in progress for property.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I believe we're out of time, but Frank, Joey, Tom, Bob, thank you very much. To all of you here, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us. I hope that today was very informative, and if you provide some feedback to SIA, I know they would greatly appreciate it, as would we. So thank you all very much.